massacres and the Trail of Tears and all the numerous accounts of the devastation of Native people on this continent.
That was something that moved me so much about what one of your sons said about how he was so proud of you that you had been working to truly document and bring to light how essential Native ceremonies are to our peoples, and to really enforce the respect. And I was listening to you also speak about how you first arrived at this academy as a Native woman, and 28 years ago.
Yes.
And if you could tell us and our listeners more about what it was like for you to come there all those years ago into that room, and who was there and how you challenged them.
Well, I'd been hired at UC Santa Barbara to develop the field of Native American religions. So I thought, well, I need to go to this American Academy of Religion, so I went. And there were 2 sessions on Native American religious traditions. And I thought, well, that's really exciting. So I ran over there to be sure to get there early, and I wanted to hear everything that was being said. And it was quite a shock for me because all of the people that were on these panels were not Native American.
Mm-hmm. There
were a series of different ethnicities, and none of them were Native American. So I thought, there's something wrong with this picture, right? It's common expression.
Yeah.
So I decided that I needed to talk to them. So I approached them. They were very guarded. They didn't really want to talk about it. And most of them were approaching the subject from retired anthropological ethnographies, people who had studied, supposedly shamans and natives, or all the different terms that they use, savages, etc.
Yeah.
So the second year, I thought about this all year long. And I decided to ask a few questions. So I insisted my graduate students need to learn an Indian language, either their own or the one that they're doing the research in.
Right.
I also felt that it was extremely important to do sensitive, qualitative field work.
Yeah.
So the first thing I did was after they finished, I raised my hand and I said, well, in actuality, how many of you have ever studied an Indian language?
Right.
And of course, no hands went up. And the next question was, well, how many of you have done extended field work in the cultures that you're representing? And none of them raised their hand again. So the third year, they started fading out. And by the 4th and 5th year, the panels were students that I had trained who had done their PhDs at UC Santa Barbara in the Department of Religious Studies, and some of the students that I'd met at Harvard as well, like myself.
Yeah.
So it was really an interesting experience for me to see that I could make change. As you say in Spanish, whether one person can actually do it, you can, if you make up your mind, you can do it. You can make change.
Mm-hmm.
So of course I approached it very gently and very calmly, as I like to be, without having to be really forceful.
Mm-hmm.
So it worked.
Yeah.
And now, of course, the panels are all our students, since I've trained more than 28 students.
Yeah.
So we have plenty of people, and then we have our colleagues who are not Native American, but who work very diligently with us in this struggle.
Yeah, it's really incredibly impressive to see who was in that room and who was in that session at that point, because it was many Native scholars, but also many non-Native scholars, but who are beloved by the communities that they work with.
Yes.
So we'll come back and talk more about this after our next music break. Thanks, Matt.
I'm Jay with a Nightwolf.
Marone Iriarte.
With The Native Voice Speaks.
Heart disease and cancer are top killers in Indian country. Indians.com. Heart disease and cancer are the leading causes of death in Indian country, according to a report by the CDC's National Center for Health Statistics released on November the 20th. Heart disease caused nearly 20% of deaths among American Indians and Alaskan Natives in 2004. Cancer closely followed, accounting for 80% of death. The same top 2 killers were seen among other racial and ethnic groups in the U.S., but Native Americans were less likely to die of heart disease and cancer than European Americans, African Americans, or Asian Americans. However, Native Americans were more than twice as likely to die of accidents than that of other racial and ethnic groups. Native Americans were also likely to die from diabetes than whites, but comparable rates were seen among African Americans and Asian Americans. Suicide ranked as the 8th leading cause of death in Indian country, accounting for 3.1% of deaths in 2004, twice more than the rate among whites and far higher than blacks. American Indians and Alaska Natives also had a higher HIV death rate, but not as high as African Americans. Few differences were seen when the data was examined by gender. The risk factors that contribute to the prevalence of heart disease in Indian country are diabetes, obesity, and tobacco use, which also contributes to cancer. The top 10 causes of death among American Indians and Alaska Natives: heart disease, number 1, cancer, number 2, accidents, number 3, diabetes, number 4, brain disease, liver disease and cirrhosis, lower respiratory diseases, suicide, influenza and pneumonia, and kidney disease.
Indian Voices and a new comprehensive Indian policy. Editor's report. Indian Country Today, November 23, 2007. In the space of 2 years, between 1968 and 1970, Presidents Johnson and Nixon made comprehensive and innovative statements on Indian policy. Together, the combined statements created the fundamental principles of contemporary policy, usually called self-determination policy. No president before or after Johnson and Nixon has provided such comprehensive statements on Indian policy and relations between Indians and the U.S. During the early 1900s, Indian policy cycled back and forth between supporting Indian self-government, paternalism, or fostering full citizenship, often called assimilation. Since the 1930s, all presidents have rejected the paternalism of the 1880s to the 1920s. Between 1930 and the 1960s, presidents rejected paternalism, but had various solutions to Indian policy. The clearest expression of the full citizenship policy was the termination policy of the